Ha Chi Ki remembers the ditch. They shot to kill all, she says, very small children. The ditch was deeper then, and they had to shoot 2 or 3 times to see whether there were any survivors. She lost 2 children, her mother and a niece. She was shot in the leg. She cries, she says, because she is old and it's hard to walk and her wounds hurt when the weather changes. Memories of death in a ditch, in a hamlet called My Lai. It happened in March 1968. Charlie Company of the 11th Light Infantry Brigade came to My Lai, met no resistance, and killed many people. The black plaque in the My Lai Museum lists 504 names. Americans learned about My Lai months later when Army photographer Ron Haberle's pictures ran in Life magazine. They were hard to look at. Here at My Lai, plaques mark where GIs burned down houses. This family lost 5 members. This family lost 3. Trong Thi Lee says she was covered by the other dead. She woke up and saw that her sons were dead. She lost 10 family members here. And then in the clinic, she saw a boy who became her adopted son. They are together still. In America, people looked at the pictures, heard the story, and did not want to believe.
They were the sons of Americans, the children of Americans who had been sent to this war, so I think it's always difficult for parents perhaps to recognize that a child can do something wrong. So I think it was a very difficult thing to accept the reality that one of our own or some of our own could be engaged in this kind of conduct.
Aubrey Daniel, then an Army captain, was the prosecutor in the court-martial of Platoon Commander Lieutenant William Calley, who was charged with murder.
I think the My Lai massacre really brought into focus for the country the limits, if you will, on our consciences. It made us take a very, very long, hard look at the war and the conduct of the war and what it meant for Americans. And so I think it was a very emotional time for our country to look at the realities of this.
Calley said he was just following orders, firing at people, at the enemy, sir. Did you see women? I don't know, sir. Did you see children? I don't know, sir. They were all the enemy. They were all to be destroyed, sir. Following orders.
What Lieutenant Calley did was, in this village, he gathered up unarmed old men, women, children, and babies, and summarily executed them over an extended period of time. Many, 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 many. There is no order that justifies that type of conduct.
The jury found Calley guilty and sentenced him to life, but he was freed less than 3 years later. And here, now, it is all quiet. This groundsman had the only gun, an air gun, for hunting small birds. Got one. About 3,000 people live in My Lai now. They farm, as people did then, 27 years ago. There are 6 survivors here. They hold no grudges. Pham Chi Tuan lost a father, a husband, a sister, and a brother. The past is the past, she says now, and I would like the American people and the Vietnamese people to try to heal the wounds of war and let the war be gone. Ha Chi Ki says she wants peace, no more war, a normal life. And Trong Thi Lee, who lost 10 family members, says, I put the past aside. I say I forget the war, and my only wish is good relations with Americans.
They keep a book here of visitors' comments. One American who'd been a medic during the war wrote, "We need to realize we are all one. We all carry within us the potential to be the killer and the victim." And maybe that's the lesson we learned at My Lai, that Americans are not always the good guys, that we are good and evil, just like everybody else. Another turning point, of course, was this place, Kent State University in Ohio. There's a candlelight vigil going on behind me, part of the remembrance of what happened here a quarter of a century ago. An explosion of violence then, which still lingers today.
What did you do, just reiterate the facts of the case, or the story?
Not really.
Dean Kaler, teaching at Federal Hocking High School, Athens County, Ohio. a substitute hoping for a staff job next year.
I think I can bring a lot of life experiences to the classroom, as well as a certain amount of maturity.
Part of that life experience, part of that maturity came from the event that put Dean Kaler in a wheelchair. It happened May 4th, 25 years ago. Students were protesting the war. National Guard troops moved onto the Kent State campus. Some students threw rocks. Guardsmen fired tear gas first, and then...
Suddenly, out of the 75 guardsmen, only about a dozen stopped, turned, raised their guns, and shot down this hill into the crowd of students.
Four dead, 9 wounded. Alan Canfora in the wrist, Dean Kaler in the back. A picture that startled America.
I was walking, focusing, and you could see this tension building inside of her, starting to sob. And then she let out with a scream.
Mary Vecchio by Jeffrey Miller's body.
I think it was a turning point.
Empty spaces in a college yearbook. Young Americans had killed young Americans. Definitely a turning point.
It began to raise questions about the whole student experience, which in turn began to raise questions about the Vietnam War and our involvement in it. And that's what conscience does, doesn't it? It raises tough questions. And so I think Kent State, in many ways, tragically, was a conscience of the nation.
Now, a quarter of a century later, spring rain falls softly on the stones which memorialize the dead and wounded, and on the daffodils. Kent State has planted more than 58,000 daffodils. One for each American who died in Vietnam. Stones and bells and flowers. And lessons did we learn from the killings here?
Hopefully one of the things that we learn as we reflect on what happened here is the complete non-utility of violence.
I would hope that everybody has learned that there's lawful ways to dissent, assemblies and all that sort of thing, and there are illegal and unlawful ways to do it, and I hope that everybody's learned what the difference between those two.
Both sides at Kent State demonstrated during the Gulf War, but
as those arguments escalated to stronger and stronger feelings, I would see students intercede and saying, cool it, we don't want another May 4th. You know, and so they learned, a group of students that many of them, as I say, may not have been alive at the time.
It was a different time, of course, different emotions. Tracy Williams heads a council of the students who live on campus.
I'm 21 years old, and I can't imagine walking across campus and throwing rocks at National Guardsmen, and I can't imagine just being shot on the way to campus or on the way to class. I can't even comprehend that.
I can't remember how many bullets offhand, but 12 students were killed.
It was so long ago, the tour guides seem uncertain of the details. So long ago, there is a small museum in the library. So long ago, but still alive here.
May 4th Task Force College, Dems Care, Stephanie speaking.
Stephanie Campbell heads the May 4th Task Force, which is in charge of the annual ceremonies remembering the killing.
I think that the biggest lesson out of it is even if the risks are high, you should never keep your mouth shut. You should always speak up for what you believe in.
Campbell works to advocate student activism, which she says is alive but different, more locally focused, less violent. Yeah. And Dean Kaler, the teacher, he'll be here May 4th, still angry, he says, at Richard Nixon, at then Governor James Rhodes.
I'm a little angry at those folks, but I work at giving forgiveness and having it in my heart. And it's important because if I continued to be angry and express that anger regularly, I'd probably be, would eat away at me like a cancer.
D.D. Mao last year, first and only race, never saw the results.
One of the things Kaler has done with his life is become an associate member of the Vietnam Veterans Association. At this meeting, they're planning their annual bike race, D.D. Mao, Vietnamese for go very fast. And how do the vets feel about having a war protester join their group?
I admit a lot of resentment against the war protesters. but age has a way of smoothing out some of the high points. But with Dean, it does not present a problem.
Kent State was a turning point, and Dean Kaler's life has taken another turn since then. A spell in local politics, now plans for teaching. He has worked within a system which didn't always work for him. He has come to terms with who he is.
I'm just happy to be alive. I get up in the morning, put my pants on, and just happy to draw a breath and see the sun come up.
So at Kent State, lessons, a turning point, and candlelight. Bernie?
Bruce, turning point indeed. Americans are very busy people. They work long hours. They work very hard at rearing families. What lessons from these two pieces can we draw about future actions taken by a government, taken by authorities?
Some people here say it could happen again. Stephanie Campbell, the young woman who has been organizing the May 4th observance this year, thinks it could happen again. But the consensus, Bernie, seems to be that the student movement, though it's alive, is different, that its concerns are more local, and that the anger of those Vietnam days is absent now.
And finally, for you personally, Vietnam, Kent State, what did you feel then when you covered both? What do you feel now on this anniversary?
What I felt then was that the war was a terrible mistake, the kind of thing that Robert McNamara has just said in his book. And what I feel now is that it's a long time ago. The Vietnamese, when I was there recently, seem to have come to terms with it. Maybe we can too.
Thank you. Bruce Morton from Kent State as the chimes peal. The name on the wall reads Ronald E. Simpson, but the guys back home knew him as Ronnie. Back home was Bardstown, Kentucky. It's a place that sacrificed 16 sons to the Vietnam War. They've raised a lot of crops in Kentucky's second oldest town. It's inspired a song or two. That's my old Kentucky home. And they've distilled a lot of spirits here, too. So much that they call it the whiskey capital of the world.
It's just a great place to have been born in and live in all your life.
We have a lot of old buildings, a lot of nice people, a lot of respect for our heritage.
Bardstown's men have always gone to war, as far back as the American Revolution. But in the 1960s came a faraway place called Vietnam.
Well, I think at that time, Bardstown was very much behind the Vietnam War, by and large.
Many of Bardstown's best chose to serve their country by joining the National Guard.
Many of them, some of them were brothers and cousins. It's a bonding, I guess, the word that's a modern word that's being used now. But it was you're almost like a family.
National Guard units are rarely called to combat duty. But in April of 1968, Washington needed more men in Vietnam, including Guard units.
One's a girl and one's a boy, and they're married.
That call-up made Skippy Stone a first-time father and an active soldier, all in one day.
I was coming down the road and I heard it on the radio, and I thought, oh, good Lord. Is this for real? You know.
Most men go to war not knowing who's fighting alongside them. Not the men of Bardstown. Their Guard unit went almost intact.
You take your regular Army guys, they're more or less there to put your time in and watch out for number one. You take our group, we were there to do a job, and everybody watched everybody's back.